An American liaison officer stood frozen over the map table. 6 days earlier, an Australian SAS patrol had slipped into the jungle. Since then, nothing. No radio traffic. No extraction call. No coordinates. No confirmation they were even alive. He finally picked up the phone and called the Australian base. "Your men have been silent for 6 days," he said. "Are you initiating search and rescue?" On the other end, someone laughed. "Planning?" The voice replied. "They're working. If something had gone wrong, you'd already know." The line went dead. The American officer slowly lowered the receiver, a chill crawling up his spine. His own teams checked in every hour, sometimes more. They called air support at first contact. They demanded extraction at the slightest complication. But these Australians? They vanished for a week, sometimes 2, and returned carrying intelligence that shattered entire operational plans, not to understand how Australian SAS learned to dissolve into jungle terrain so completely that even their allies lost track of them. We have to go back to where their doctrine was forged, back to training, back to the rule. Every recruit learned early, if you transmit, you're already dead. While American doctrine treated communication as survival, Australians treated it as exposure. And the results were making American methods look like loud, expensive failure. This is the story of why. The story of a doctrine built in Australian training. Camps that directly contradicted everything American military science believed. About combat survival. The story of radios that stayed silent while American frequencies screamed with. Traffic. The story of men who learned that communication was not a lifeline. It was a death sentence. And it begins where all Australian SAS stories begin. At Campbell Barracks, on the western coast of Australia, surrounded by scrubland Australians simply called the bush. This unremarkable installation housed the Special Air Service Regiment Australia's answer to the British SAS. Here, ordinary men were trained to do something American. Special forces never fully mastered. They were taught to disappear. Selection was brutal by any standard. Candidates arrived believing they understood hardship. Most discovered within days that they understood nothing. The marshes came first. Kilometers of harsh Australian terrain under full combat load. No pace, no scheduled breaks. Just movement until instructors decided movement would stop. Men collapsed from heat exhaustion. Feet blistered until skin peeled away. Bodies failed under the slow accumulation of pain. But the purpose wasn't endurance. It was exposure. Stress stripped away personality. Exhaustion revealed truth. The instructors weren't interested in who could march the farthest. They wanted to see who could function when everything hurt and nothing made sense. Sleep disappeared. Food was rationed into constant hunger. The body failed in stages: feet, joints, then will. Instructors watched how men broke. Some quit openly. Honest failure. Others deteriorated quietly, making small mistakes until they became operationally useless. Some tried to hide it, pretending competence they no longer possessed. All of these failures were acceptable. They revealed limits. But one failure ended careers instantly. Some men could not function without feedback. They needed reassurance, encouragement, someone watching, someone confirming their suffering meant something. Australian SS doctrine considered this dependency fatal, because in the jungle, no one would be watching. Unlike American selection, where instructors, medics, and constant evaluation created a controlled environment, Australian selection included real isolation. Candidates were dropped alone into the outback. Minimal equipment. A distant checkpoint. No supervision. No safety net. This wasn't theater. Men got lost. Navigation errors added days. Conditions turned dangerous. They were actually alone, and in that reality, weakness revealed itself. Some men couldn't operate without the psychological comfort of rescue, without authority, without connection. They failed not because they were weak, but because they were dependent. Those who passed demonstrated something far rarer than fitness. They proved they could operate in genuine isolation, make decisions without guidance, function knowing no one was coming. That trait would define everything that followed. Training after selection revolved around one principle. Self-sufficiency. Australian SAS patrols were designed to operate for extended periods without resupply, reinforcement, or support. Navigation emphasized terrain. Association over instruments. Maps were memorized until the ground existed, mentally before it existed physically. They learned to read landscapes, ridges, drainage lines, vegetation shifts. Why? Because instruments require attention, and attention is limited in combat. Under fire, compass bearings fail. Pace counts disappear. Orientation collapses. Terrain recognition does not. Patrol that truly knew the ground could navigate instantly, without stopping. Without calculation. They could evade while moving. They could maintain direction under pressure, and they never needed to transmit their position. Movement training rejected. American speed entirely. Australian patrols moved painfully slow, sometimes absurdly so, but slow movement enabled silence. Every step evaluated. Every branch avoided. Every sound eliminated. At that pace, a patrol left no acoustic signature. Speed also stole awareness. Fast patrols focused on destination. Slow patrols absorbed environment. They noticed trails aircraft never saw, camps hidden for months. Sign speed would erase, but the defining difference was radio. Doctrine. Australian instructors were blunt. Every transmission is a risk. Signals emit energy. Energy can be detected. Detection leads to triangulation. In Vietnam, this wasn't theory. The enemy actively monitored Allied frequencies, not for content, but for activity. American patrols transmitted hourly. That meant hourly confirmation of presence. The enemy didn't need encryption keys. The signal itself was intelligence. Australian patrols stayed silent for days. Sometimes entire missions. Radios existed only for emergencies. Everything else depended on training. They navigated without updates, handled crises alone, operated truly isolated. American training produced soldiers who survived with support. Australian training produced soldiers who succeeded without it. When Australians arrived in Vietnam in 1966, culture shock followed. American officers expected schedules, check-ins, support coordination. They got silence. No comes plans. No fire support requests. No fixed extraction times. Patrols left. Patrols returned. What happened in between was not headquarters' concern. American officers were deeply unsettled. Silence meant failure in their doctrine until results arrived. American patrols reported contact rates near 70%, frequent firefights, running engagements, hot extractions. Australian contact rates stayed below 30%. They found the enemy, but were rarely found. Reason was simple. They weren't transmitting. Silence made them invisible. Beyond concealment, silence reshaped behavior. Americans assumed help existed. Australians assumed none did. So Australians avoided contact unless conditions were perfect. When they fought, they ambushed. Every fight was brief, violent, decisive. Their kill ratios exceeded American equivalents, not because they fought more, but because they fought smarter. One patrol located a major enemy headquarters. American doctrine would have transmitted immediately. Instead, Australians observed for days. They mapped everything. Then, They withdrew silently. The strike that followed was devastating precisely because the enemy never knew. They'd been seen. That operation became legendary. And the lesson was permanent. American doctrine demanded control. Australian doctrine demanded trust. One relied on communication. The other relied on men. And in the jungle silence won.